My name's Ramon, and I'm going to tell you a story. As this is the first story, I'm going to explain what's going on. So I'm going to do these in one take because I've realized I don't really like the editing process. So you might hear a click, you might hear My name's Ramon, and I'm going to tell you a story. For you to get an idea of what this whole thing is, I'm going to be doing it in one take because I've realized I don't like the editing process. And in reality, we all make mistakes when we talk, and I don't see the need to take it out. So you might hear a clock ticking, you might hear a dog bark, you might even hear a cat, or whatever else Buenos Aires throws at me right now. This whole story started with a dream. I've always had really interesting, vivid dreams ever since I was a kid, but for a while they stopped. A few nights ago, I had one of those really vivid dreams. The whole night, the same story was repeated to me over and over and over, and the summary was simple. It was that the story had made itself, and all I needed to do was show the process. And I thought that was fascinating, and it made very little sense to me. But then when I sat down to write, something very interesting came out, and I'm going to read that right now. And that's going to be the starting point for where this whole conversation goes. It's called 6 Months Off. So as a quick prompt, I woke up in an airport-themed dream. I took a nap after a friend of mine left. During this dream, I was in an airport. I was early, but for some reason I didn't check in. I saw my parents and my brother behind glass, but I couldn't get to them. We were on the same flight, and they knew it. But at that point, our relationship was at a point where we weren't really talking, and I could feel that in the dream. Seconds later was an hour to take off. I looked around and I didn't find them. I went to check in, but the line was so long, and I wasn't able to check in. By the time I looked up, it was 5 minutes till the boarding door closes. I missed the flight. And then while I was analyzing that dream, I made a small note, and I realized that I feel shame when I don't follow others. I tell you what I think you want to hear. I'd rather escape and run instead of face the fear head on. Thoughts are not action. I cannot change the world without action. Thoughts and ideas are a dime a dozen. So let me now start the story, because that was the prompt that led up to the story. I have a story to tell that's been incubating for years. It began at my birth. It's guided my every thought and action. It's in my every step. Since my birth, it was shamed away. I pushed it down until it went silent. It was still in my every step, but I gave it names. Those names grew into the core of my identity. American, Black, Nigerian, Yoruba, engineer, cook, calm, a chilled guy. Those are all curated deceptions. I exist beyond that. Even Peter Pan will grow old before he grows up. I took 6 months off of my life as I knew it. I woke up without alarms and went to bed with silence. I made friends with my shadow. I softly comforted my pain as it dug deep into my psyche. I made friends with my pain. The more I listened, the more it spoke volumes. It reminded me of the body I had neglected. It showed me the people I had ignored. It reminded me about the life I gave up on. It showed me all the projects I had failed at. It reminded me that my life has just begun. It showed me that it can be worth living. I took 6 months off life to understand myself. Why do I say yes when I really mean no? Why do I try to please people I do not know? Why do I push away when I should be pulling close? Why do I try to control the uncontrollable? Why can't I trust myself? Why do I lie to myself? Why do I deceive myself? I spent a lot of time in silence. I realized I needed to disconnect because the internet hijacked my thoughts. I put away the iPod, deleted the apps, and dropped my phone. I got a clock that ticks to tell the time. 3 days a week I did yoga. To be fair, I took a vacation. In the midst of the silence, I heard my own voice. In the midst of the silence, I heard my own thoughts. In the midst of the silence, I heard my own body. I felt the weight of regret and wasted opportunities. I saw my future bright and clear. I was still afraid, alone, still indecisive, but most of all resentful. Resentful because I did not try. Resentful because I gave up when it was too real. Resentful for allowing my shortcomings drive. It's easy to hide and lie around others. It's hard to sit in the regret it causes. A week ago I had a dream. It felt more like a nightmare. It told me I had a story to tell. I hate talking about myself, but I don't have a choice. I called it through the silence. I made space for my inner wisdom to take over. I pulled it out so it wouldn't be silent. I kindled the whisper. Gestation is over, son. It's time to push. This life waits for no one. So I was sitting on that dream for a while, and when I decided to go into my black book, it hit me. It came out in this way, and I couldn't really, I couldn't ignore it. And what's happened is I think this is going to become a podcast or just me telling these stories. And not just the actual thing that I wrote, but the story around it. And that's the thing. I've realized that I am a visual and audio person. I'm not so much about the text. Reading is hard for me. But I think what's going to happen is that I want to transform this into something that I would want to watch. Because something that you probably don't know about me is that for the last 10 years, I have watched at least 5 YouTube videos a day consistently. I've consumed a lot of visual content, and what's interesting is that a lot of the channels that I watch have less than 10k subs. Some of them have made it up to 20 in the last 10 years, but these people have become my mentors. They have become my teachers. YouTube has been my university in a very, well, I guess my next degree or whatever. I've been really enjoying learning, and I've been learning a lot. So what's happening is what's going to be what I want to do with this audio, well, with this series, which may be a podcast, but I don't think I want to call it a podcast. I just want to call it a series of stories, is I want to make the content that I want to listen to. So for a long time, I have been fighting and failing miserably. For a long time, I would say even since my birth, the way I mentioned it in the story, I've been fighting myself. I spent a lot of time actively fighting against myself. In times when my inner wisdom would tell me that I am a creative person, that I need to spend time creating, that I need to spend time sharing, that I need to spend time with others, I would find ways to actively silence that voice because I thought that it had no value. I thought that being creative was something that had no value at all, and it was something that should be hidden away. But the thing is that some things cannot be hidden, no matter how much you try. I spent a very long time doing all the other things and assuming other parts of my identity and developing other parts of my identity. But deep within, this thing was there and it was incubating and it was growing and it would come out. I would try to run this way, but creativity would always find me. And if it's no indication, I have at least 8 or so sketchbooks that I've filled in the last 6 years. I've gone through 2 a year, and I've always filled my sketchbooks because I was bored. When I was in college, I had a sketchbook that I would use to make cartoons of things that'd be happening in class. Pretty much all throughout my school life, I'd be drawing the margins. And I remember a specific exam. I think it was a math exam because I really liked math. On the back of the paper for the exam, I drew a cartoon to the professor. And when I got my paper back, there was no comments on it, so I don't know if he saw it, but I was just that kind of person. I was pretty good at school, so I would just draw and do other things. So I took 6 months off life. About a year ago, I decided to move because nothing was working in my life. In honesty, nothing was working, and it's hard to describe that. Because from what I've noticed, I achieved everything I wanted to achieve by the age of 23. I went to college, I did university, I found cooking, and cooking, I believe, was my passion at the time. I couldn't see myself doing anything apart from cooking. But then chronic pain that had been slowly mounting over 10 years struck me down, and I went from being able to stand 13 hours to not being able to stand 30 minutes without a chair. And I'm still kind of working my way through that almost 3 years later. And so at the end of all that, I realized that I had to leave the kitchen and I needed to do something else. So I came to Buenos Aires to kind of recalibrate, or I guess refine my identity, because at that point there was nothing left. So when I first got here, I went into the kitchen because that's where I know. But then a few months later, I lost all interest in cooking in that way. And then I tried to do another thing related to the kitchen, and I lost interest in a month. And so I decided that I was going to do nothing, that I was going to spend my days doing absolutely nothing. I mean, I'm working online, so but for the most part, my days are completely free. And the idea was that I want to spend some time with myself to see what I would naturally gravitate towards, because honestly, I had no idea what I wanted to do. Like I said, I achieved everything I wanted to achieve at 23. And I thought the kitchen was going to be the thing that would that I'd be doing for the rest of my life. And so I surrendered. I went to bed without an alarm. I woke up without an alarm. I spent a lot of time alone. I didn't date. I didn't really go out that much. I did yoga 3 times a week consistently. And naturally I started drawing and I started telling stories. I found myself on stage a few times emceeing events. I read some poetry live, someone else's I just ended up doing creative things. And what was interesting is that a lot of times when I've talked to people about, how doing nothing, the first thing that they bring up is how boring that would be, or how after a while you'll just find your way to do something because you would be so bored. And I've realized that that's not what it is. When you spend a lot of time alone, you can't run from yourself. A lot of the things that you've suppressed come alive, and they are merciless. So within this 6-month period, I experienced depression that lasted almost 2 months. And that was in the beginning, because which is warranted, I believe that the depression was necessary because I was mourning the loss of the life that I thought I was going to have. I was mourning the loss of access to my body. I was having to come to terms with the fact that my body hurt in ways that it's never hurt before, and that there are just some things that I can do, but it's going to require 3 days of recovery. The depression was there because there was a period where I had a 3 week flare up where my body hurt, sitting hurt, standing hurt, moving hurt, turning over hurt, going to sleep hurt. If I even got sleep, I was happy about it. I'd have to maybe take 1 or 2 naps during the day. My body completely gave up on me. So there was that. There was also loneliness I had to work through. I had to work through being comfortable alone. I had to work through the compulsive need for me to go hang out with other people because I didn't want to hear my own thoughts. I didn't want to make friends with myself. I hated myself that much. I changed my diet because I realized the relationship between diet and my body and my emotions and how I feel and the direct link. So there are some foods that I just don't eat anymore. I eat them occasionally sometimes because as someone who cooks, there are some memories that I have that are deep rooted in some delicious things that are dangerous for my body, but I don't know. I guess I have to live a little sometimes. And the other thing that I guess anchored me or taught me a lot was yoga, doing it 3 days a week. To be honest, yoga has kicked me hard. And I say that because I haven't really, I've progressed, but I haven't progressed that much since I started. Now it's been 7 months since I started doing yoga. But what yoga has taught me is that every single day is different. There are days in class where I can touch my toes and there are days where I can't. There are days where I am extremely flexible and there are days where I'm not. There are days that I struggle and there are days that I don't struggle doing the same postures. And that's taught me a lot about like life and the process that like sometimes it's worse, sometimes it's better, but in reality there is no good or bad. There's just how you attach yourself to those feelings and those emotions. If you give them weight, they will weigh a lot. So I spent the 6 months doing nothing just to see what comes up. And naturally I found that I told stories. I drew a lot. I bought art supplies. For the first time I took myself to the art store and I bought the art materials that I wanted, and I took care of myself in that way. Because for many years I'd go to, if you're in the US, you're familiar with like Blick or Michael's or other art stores. The times when I would visit the US, I would walk into an art store and buy nothing. I'd feel shame to buy a pencil. I'd feel shame to buy a sketchbook. I'd feel shame about really, really diving into this part of myself. So I'd just go buy like random pencils or like random paints or like random things that I didn't really like because I didn't feel that my art had value. So yeah, I took myself to the art store and I bought some stuff. I created. I talked to other people honestly to see like how they think, how they feel, what are their fears. Because for a long time I didn't spend a lot of time talking with people. I was around people, but I was always silent. And at the time also, I didn't really find my voice yet, so I didn't really know what we could potentially talk about. So yeah, no, the 6 months have been very, very, very necessary. They've been very, very important. And something that I've learned, well, there's always a thing where they say, know yourself. You should know who you are. And I don't know if I know who I am, but I have discovered that, one, I deal with chronic pain, and I need to accept and incorporate that into my life. Two, I love crushing information that's visual. Three, I don't know how to do small talk. Four, I'm extremely observant and visual. I'm the kind of person that walks into your house for the second time Like, I'm the kind of person that, like, let's say I meet you today, I meet you like a month later, and I go to your house, and I recognize that, like, your glasses have changed, that you've cut your hair. I recognize that you, like, move plants around. I'm that kind of person, and for a while I was afraid of it. Another thing is that I must be moving and using my hands. If I don't use my hands and I'm not moving, I've just realized it sends me into weird thought loops and I get kind of sad. I realize that I must be able to multitask because I've recognized that if I spend too much time on something, I lose my steam. But if I like cycle between things, I get a lot done. And the last thing, which is where I believe this project is going to go, is the only things that have been constant in my life have been drawing, creating, and food. Throughout my whole life, since I was a kid, these are the only things that have been constant. Everything else has come and gone. Blogs have started and stopped. My YouTube has started and stopped. Jobs have come and gone. Interests have come and gone. Everything has come and gone except my interest in cooking and food and art and creation and drawing. And I think now it's time for me to accept that that is an integral part of my identity and start to incorporate it into my daily life and my projects, because I've realized that I just feel better when I do it. And my goal, I think, at the end is to be the kind of person who can make a living off of storytelling and creating visual work. So with that, I want to bring this first story to an end. It's the beginning of a new chapter for me. It's the beginning of a lot of things, and I have a sneaking suspicion that this is going to be one of the projects that will work, because it's coming from a genuine, honest place. It's not coming from a place of people pleasing or wanting to be something that I'm not. I'm genuinely working with who I know myself to be. And I think that's all really that's important. Otherwise, the project will lose its steam. And I say that as someone who has failed many more times than I've succeeded, and failed many more times than I would like to admit. So with that, this is the end of my story. Thank you very much for listening. And until next time, continue being awesome.